President Bola Tinubu has presented a spending plan of 58.18 trillion naira to a joint session of the National Assembly for the 2026 fiscal year. Now, he declared that all armed groups operating outside state authority will henceforth be treated as terrorists, promising tougher security actions, structural budget discipline, and deeper economic forums. National Assembly correspondent Joke Adisa reports.
At exactly 2:59 p.m., President Bola Tinubu entered the venue of the joint sitting of the two chambers of the National Assembly, signaling the commencement of the budget presentation exercise. In his welcome remarks, President of the Senate, Godswill Akpabio, appreciates the timeliness of Mr. President as he speaks to the current security and economic challenges facing the country.
And it is important to place on record that the progress we are now witnessing under your administration, sir, has been achieved despite persistent skepticisms, relentless criticisms, and the loud objections of naysayers and traducers, who doubted both the necessity and the result of these reforms. These were difficult decisions, yet necessary ones, and they reflect a leadership willing to choose a long-term national interest over short-term benefits and comfort.
For more than 30 minutes, President Bola Tinubu held his audience spellbound as he spoke to the challenges of the past 2.5 years. He admitted the dismal performance of the 2025 budget and promised an end to operating multiple budgets.
This is a reset, a very hard one. Avoiding abandoned projects, unpaid contractual obligations, and running a multiple budget, both inherited and unfulfilled mandates. It's a problem staring the nation. So we are terminating the habit of running 3 budgets on one inflow.
Mr. President announced the components of the 2026 appropriation bill tagged Budget of Consolidation, Renewed Resilience, and Shared Prosperity. It speaks tough on non-state actors holding the country by the jugular. The president promised Nigerians that his administration will invest in security with clear accountability.
Today, I present a budget that consolidates our gains, strengthens our resilience, and takes this country from out of the dark tunnel of hopelessness, from the survivor to growth.
In a highlight of the budget presentation, defense and security got the largest share with 5.41 trillion naira, followed by infrastructure. Key aggregates of the budget include 34.33 trillion naira as expected to revenue, 15.25 trillion naira for debt service, recurrent non-debt of 15.25 trillion naira, and capital expenditure of 26.08 trillion naira.
This budget is therefore designed to provide a single coherent program of national renewal, a national security and peace building.
The Speaker, House of Representatives, appreciates the President for his yearly appearance in performance of a constitutional responsibility. He says security and economic challenges must be overcome to enhance citizens' quality of lives and property. The President promised Nigerians 2026 will be a year of stricter discipline in budget execution. The two chambers of the National Assembly will get busier in the new year as they ensure that the 2026 appropriation bill gets all the attention it deserves, such that it becomes law in record time. Joke Adisa, TVC News, Abuja.
Joining us via Zoom for this conversation is Chairman, House Committee on Economy, Boyega Isiaka, and also financial analyst and CEO Finance with Mukhtar, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
It's good to have you both here. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. So the first question I have here today is, what is your assessment of this budget of consolidation, renewed resilience, and shared prosperity? Now, inflation is down to 14.45%. Reserves are at a 7-year high. Now, are these structural gains or temporary reliefs, in your opinion?
That's to
Mukhtar.
That to me?
Let's have Mr. Mukhtar.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Structural gain, yes. I think it's hard to do with the reform. And also that's why we've seen the kind of what we've seen in the reserve. Even if some will argue that some of this reserve that we've seen, some of this fund we've seen in the reserve was largely driven by Eurobond, which take almost $20 billion into that foreign reserve at a very high interest rate. If you look at the low interest global economy that we have now, yes, many can argue that. For the inflationary pressure, you know that sometime last year by this time we're having inflation up to like up to as high as 37%. Then we have the rebasing, and we saw inflation come down by virtue of this rebasing. And so if you look at that, then you don't want to be so excited. You say there's still a little bit of risks, because if you look at month-to-month inflation, it has been sparking, especially in the place of food and non-alcoholic beverages, housing, and others. So you could also begin to look at those inflation and say that they are not tempt to reality year to year, but month to month it seems to be saying what we all know about the inflationary pressure. And when you look at what the CBN has done also by maintaining rate rather than cutting, that tells you that they have also seen a risk in terms of a reduced rate. That is one. Then secondly, you also see in the budget also, they have also looked at that, and even if we are doing 14.45, they are projecting an inflation of about 16%. And for me, you know why that is happening, is because we are going into an electionary year whereby you have a lot of liquidity in the system, and that could fuel inflation. So I think structurally, yes, our reserve has grown, like I said, through foreign portfolio investors, through Eurobond. Inflation is still touch and go.
All right, let me quickly come to Mr. Boyega Isiaka, Honorable Boyega Isiaka. Well, you were at the National Assembly and the President was there yesterday to present the budget. How would you describe the acceptance of this budget presented yesterday by the lawmakers?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Well, wait, Honorable Boyega, well, the question is, you were at the National Assembly yesterday at the joint session of the National Assembly where the President presented the 2026 budget. How would you describe the acceptance of this budget presented by the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Tinubu, to the lawmakers yesterday?
Well, thank you very much. You are right. I was there, and the excitement and the camaraderie between the executive and the legislature was very clear and glaring. But in terms of my assessment, I think I would say that it's a budget of truthfulness. The truth of the matter is that the budget statement was able to analyze even areas of of multiple budgets and so many other areas that the president and the executive feels that they are not good enough, and they also rule out things that are going to be done to stop that. And I think that is very important. A problem known and identified is a problem that is half solved. So that is very important in terms of those numbers that the analyst mentioned. I mean, that is where we are now, and nobody can. I'm sure that we all agree that in the last 2 years, a lot of gains have been made. And I think what this budget wants to do is to consolidate on those gains. We know that these gains will not.
Well, we seem to be having an issue with
I guess it's back.
Connection there. Is it back?
For me.
Okay.
Network.
Can I? Can I continue?
Well,
all right. Yes. The budget. The way I saw
it. We welcome you on the show.
Thank
you so much for
thank you very much.
I guess the lawmaker is back.
All right.
You can continue with your line of thought.
Okay. So I'm familiar, like I said, for me, the high point of the budget speech is paragraph 16. Where the problem, the president clearly said that the government will spend with purpose, manage debt, with discipline, and also pursue a broad-based sustainable growth. I think those key words are what is very important. And I think it is able to, the ability to pursue them to the letters that will give us the kind of results that we want. So to me, just to conclude on this first reaction, is that I think to me, the budget met the expectation of the representatives of the people at the assembly yesterday, because some of the complaints that we've been talking about within the legislature were clearly analyzed and solution provided in the budget. The issue of double budget, extension of budget, and the president has said that by March all of that will come to an end, and I think that will just be very good. Very good for us. And like I said, the most important here is that how do we consolidate in the gains that we have made? Whether there was rebasing or there was rebasing. Rebasing is a different thing that happens all over the world. It's not limited only to Nigeria. The important thing is that after the rebasing, what has been happening to the inflation figures and also to GDP and all of that. So that's where I see it. I think it's a good budget, well presented, and I think the important thing now is that after the passage, to ensure that it is properly implemented and executed.
All right, Mr. Mokhtar Mohammed, we always analyze the budget and say, oh, the budget is good, the budget is this and all that. Yet we have a very little performance of our budget of some years past. Are we looking at a situation where the load of the 2025 budget is going to impede the plans for 2026? And that's just one side of the question. The other side is that the federal government is already asking the National Assembly to approve a particular amount of money to be borrowed to finance the budget. How will this impact the whole budget put together?
Well, definitely the 2025 budget might have an impact because, again, like what the president said, in terms of budget performance, it was just between 17.7%. And that, for me, is poor for the 2025 budget. And when you see that extension in terms of capital projects, you want to see how are we going to be able to achieve what we could not achieve in terms of percentage for 1 year. How are we going to achieve it within the next 3 months to make sure that we don't have those two budgets running side by side? I think it's going to be a very uphill task. I don't know how that will happen. So that could also have an impact, especially if you look at that extension. It's largely driven by infrastructural projects. So and has to be with cash backing. So for me, that's a big challenge to the government. I don't know how they're going to find a way around through that to be able to achieve that as soon as looking at our revenue. Now, looking at 2026, of course, when you look at the budget, the revenue of about 34 trillion and the budget about 58 trillion, then definitely you are beginning to see a shortfall. So there's no how that the government will not go borrowing. But now, borrowing for what and what particular project? That's always my problem. There's no government in the world that does not borrow. You have to borrow, but we have to borrow with specifics. We have to borrow and tie to project. Are we borrowing for the Lagos Coastal Project? Are we borrowing Lagos Calabar Coastal Project? Are we all the infrastructural project? Are we going to tie this borrowing to them so that we can hold them accountable and say, look, you borrowed money for this and for that, and why is that not happening? I think for me, that is where we are. And again, I think it's good to have the chairman of the House in terms of economy listening. And I think government has gone beyond where government can do everything for itself. If you want to have a performance with the kind of performance, you want to have a global best performance, you need to start thinking of the PPP, public-private partnership. Is the way globally that even the United States with all the funds they have, they do PPP. So why should government use their scarce resources in trying to develop infrastructure? I think government should begin to look at where build and operate. We've seen that happen. We've seen the kind of result that has been able to produce for Nigeria. So I think the government should be looking at that, because globally government does not have the resources to meet most of its developmental projects. So that when they free up some of these a very capital intensive project, they will be able to concentrate in social investment, in healthcare, in education, and also in the welfare of the ordinary Nigerian. So for me, it's already a challenge, and that challenge could also go further, because again, when you look at the bench price of crude oil, what they are putting compared to 2025, remember our benchmark was about $75. And today, crude oil is selling between $63 to $65. Even with that, there's still a challenge. 2 weeks ago, it fell to a low of almost $54 before we saw those recoveries. So I think we must be conservative also in that area. I like the exchange rate. The exchange rate is about 1,512. Then percentage. I think that is fair. Oil production at 1.88 million barrels. That is very fair. That's very fair and conservative compared to 2025, when we have that push 2.1 million barrels that we never met. So we could see some little bit of ambitious and tied to conservative in areas. I think that for me is the key drive of this budget this time. We need to see how that will work. But again, in terms of borrowing, sorry, you can't help it. You already have it shortfall. Though you're looking at the new tax law, the new tax law still has its own challenges that have not been addressed. The implementation committee is going around trying to meet a lot of key stakeholders to see how you can fine-tune that act. Unfortunately, I always say that these were things that should have been done earlier, even before the passing of the bill that was not done. We are seeing more of the presidential tax committee coming out to tell us what to enjoy in this and that. I think this should have been done seamlessly before now. So by now, we won't have any way to doubt whether the implementation will start in January 1st, or we are going to see suspension in some area to get stakeholders' view. Because once you do that, that means it's going to affect government revenue, because government revenue is not consistent when you look at oil price. But when you look at taxation, which is internally driven, you could see all government globally look at taxation as a way of driving their revenue rather than external areas that you don't have control of, because you don't have control of the price of oil, but you have control in terms of the people that pay tax in your economy. Yeah. So for me, is a big challenge to the 2026 budget. But telling whether 2025 budget will have an impact on it, definitely will. If by March we are not able to achieve that result, then it became a very difficult task for the government.
Okay. All right. I'm Honorable Boyega. My question is to you, still on the situation of talking about the size now of the budget. Now, in 2025, we actually saw the total expenditure was actually 49.7 trillion naira. In 2026, we have a significant increase to 58.18 trillion naira. Now, when we look at the total revenue, we're seeing that there's even a slight decline from 34.82 trillion naira to 34.33 trillion naira decline now. It's seeming as if as spending is increasing, the anticipated revenue is reducing. Now, what is your comment on this, and should this be a point of concern?
Well, I don't think there's so much issue with that. Like the Mr. Mukhtar said, this budget also combine, conservatism with the objectives of ensuring that we have a sustainable economy. And let me also correct something. The eventual benchmark price that was, the exchange rate was actually 1,400. It was 1,512 at the time we were discussing it at the MDF stage. but we just look at, government look at it more deeply and say that, look, we need to be, a bit more conservative. So that's what was used. And also the benchmark price of 64.6. It's also, some people also felt that, the oil price will go a lot higher, but the government still feel that, this is, very conservative. Also because of the experience of the past. We don't want to have expenses revenue rather, that will not be met, that will now affect the budget. But in terms of those numbers, I think the important thing here, I do not have the details of those numbers here, and also cannot hear you very well. But I think the important thing here is that at the end of the day, the deficit is about 23.8 trillion, while the capital, the capex, the capital expenditure is about 26 trillion. That means that there's no dime of the deficit that is expected to go into capex, and into recurrent expenditure rather. And also the tax law, that we also expect that the revenue is going to do a lot better, because the new tax law is going to take effect in January, and like he also rightly said, that is there's a bit more control of over that than oil price and all of that. So then the deficit that we have, and because you also mentioned the issue of PPP, and all that, which is very, very, that's private financing, which is very, very correct. But the important thing here is that we also need to strengthen our security, the internal security, and a few other things internally before we can get this one the quantum that is required. And I think that is also why we have the government, also spending so much. That defense has the highest revenue. The allocation of resources, because we all agree that we need to strengthen the security so that the country can also be much more attractive to the private, private financing that is required for PPP. So the long and short of my answer to what you have said, which I said I didn't particularly get very clearly, is that I think the revenue projection has been very conservative in nature. We do not expect that the government will have much problem in meeting this revenue. We even expect that it to be surpassed, and if it does, it will reduce even the deficit that we're talking about. And even the deficit that we have now is way below the capital expenditure. So we still expect that whatever borrowing that is necessary to be done will be done to finance capital expenditure. That is the generality of what we have in the budget that is presented, which I said is basically, let's face it now, we know exactly where we are, so that we know we can make progress.
Okay, let me quickly come to Mr. Mukhtar. Let's quickly work on some figures on allocations to some key sectors in the country. Defense and security is about 5.41 trillion naira. Infrastructure is taking 3.56 trillion naira. Education is about 3.52 trillion naira. Health is about 2.48 trillion naira. What's your reaction concerning this? And also, inflation may be moderating, but Nigerians are still saying that food prices are still unbearable. Where are we on 2026 budgets?
Okay, let me start with health, which is 2 point something. I am a strong advocate of government partnership in the health sector, whereby you leave that aspect to create the enabling environment policies so that private sector will drive this health sector. And you have also, government have done well to come up with the health insurance scheme, and they've also introduced that even to the pension plan. Now you as an informal sector can begin to see that. And I think that maybe that's what is responsible for that shortfall that you have seen there. For me, I don't think it's an issue, because again, what we have seen in terms of healthcare is we have very big hospitals, but we don't have enough doctors to even handle patients. So maybe what I would say is that 2 point something should be going into the welfare of doctors, to get more qualified doctors, and then also improve some of the infrastructure which are dilapidated, especially federal hospitals. Sometimes you go to these hospitals, you don't get bed space, and that. But again, I still go back to that PPP, public-private partnership, like what is done in Lagos State, whereby you see the state hospital standing par with a private and driven policy also. So that could also help in augmenting that shortfall. In the area of inflation, yes, like I said, when Nigerians are not feeling the impact of inflation there, because month to month we are still having that spark in inflation, and so the ordinary people will still be complaining in terms of food price and others. I think that we could still have those challenges going into 2026, but again, it's solvable. As we see farmers begin to go to farm, security improve, you could see those inflation numbers really turn to reality on ground. But you should also know that in terms of reforms, when you have reforms, first of all, investors benefit, companies benefit, then before it comes to the individuals, because when investors benefit, company benefits, then you begin to see that in terms of income coming in there. And so you get a lot of Nigerians begin to feel that, oh, we are seeing the impact of some of this reform, especially in the area of inflation. But we'll continue to talk. I like that the government have said that we're going to see 16% next year, which is good. Going forward, hopefully before this administration comes to an end, we'll be moving towards a single-digit inflation, which for me is the key. It's a no-brainer when you see defense having that kind of amount. It's a no-brainer. I mean, it would have been suicidal if we say we don't allocate that to defense. So I think I agree that. But again, like the president said, we must begin to see those figures match up with results on the field, not necessarily having those figures there and you don't see those results. You see a lot of activities are happening that you think the security agencies should tell. I think for me, it's a no-brainer. But again, we need to see those results match with those numbers that the president have given to the defense ministry.
All right, Honorable Isiaka, I was quite happy yesterday when I heard the president talk tough when it came to security and budgetary allocation for security. And I also want to tie it to the success of the agricultural sector, because we really do need the agricultural sector to be vibrant. Now, it is one aspect that had a noticeable, budgetary allocation. What story does that tell, and how should Nigerians react to it? In support, or should it be, let's see if it will work?
Well, I think it should be in support. And I would just tie that to what Mr. Mukhtar said, that what Nigerians should just be asking for is to match this funding with results. And once we have that, a lot of things will happen. I mean, just like I mentioned, even the PPP that has been previously mentioned by my colleague here, which is very good. I mean, government cannot do it all. Private funding and private financing has to come in. It's also influenced by some of these things. So I think that Nigerians should only be requesting for results. There's no amount that is too much for us to have security of our life and property as a nation. So this figure that has been voted there, I think it is good, and for it to be the first, I mean the one that has the highest allocation, I think it's good. The important thing is for us to ensure that we match this. And when I will still refer to that speech, where the president said that we are going to spend with purpose. So I also expect that every naira, every that is spent out of this would be to achieve one thing or the other, and all of us, we should just come together and be involved so that we can also pay attention to this to ensure that we have, because like you said, it affects agric, it affects everything, even tourism, and there's so much money also in tourism, even entertainment, it affects. So there are talks about the airfare going up. Airfare is going up because nobody wants to go by the road because of the challenges that we have on the road, the security challenges. So it affects quite a lot of things, and that's why what we need is for it to be spent purposefully. And I think the president has even said it himself in the budget that we see, and I'm sure that the oversighting committees in the National Assembly, both chambers, will also follow up on this to ensure that this is done, so that our security can be enhanced And what that is enhanced, it impacts even the food inflation that we are talking about, which is correct. It will impact on that.
Yeah. Okay.
Honorable, are you confident that this budget, as it's called, budget of shared prosperity, will bring more prosperity to Nigerians come 2026?
I'm confident. I'm confident because we have indeed in the last two and a half years recorded some improvement in inflation. Is curtailed. Reserve has gone up. Even the CBN interest rate, for the first time within this period, were reduced, and so many other indices. But the next most important thing now is that how do people now begin to feel this impact much more than they are feeling it now, and that is the issue of consolidation. That's why it becomes very important. So I'm confident, and this is exactly what has been going on, even at the discussion stage with the ministers and all that. This is also one of the things that has been mentioned, and I think that I should also add quickly that even the national plan, the national plan that we have, the current one, the new one that is going to be from 2026 to 2031, also takes into consideration the impact of some of these things, even at the world level. And there's a program that is going on now, being anchored by the Ministry of Budget and National Planning, that is also going to ensure this, so that people can actually feel some of these numbers at the grassroots level. So the way I look at it is that we have to take care of the area, we have to take care of the macro economy, and I think that is what has been happening. We have to take care of macroeconomy, but after doing that, we have to come down to the people so that they can feel it more. And I believe that will be done.
Okay, very important. The people have to feel the implementation of the budget. Now, Mr. Mukhtar, my question is to you. Now, with your finance experience now looking at the budget, fine, we're hearing that, yes, if it's implemented, it will affect everything positively. But from your finance experience, please tell us, what would you say is the biggest risk and the challenge this particular budget faces?
Revenue. It's a no-brainer, revenue. Revenue is going to be a very big challenge. You're already seeing the shortfall. And you can also be setting, like the Honorable said, $64.8. I think is really, really very, very, very ambitious. Don't forget that we might have an end to the Russia-Ukraine crisis, which will mean that Russia will pump more oil legally into the system, even if they are pumping it now. But that will be legally driven. So that could also pose a challenge. Why you saw the kind of price you saw after the oil price went down was because of American attack of the Venezuela oil vessel and blockage. So you saw that have impact. So I think for me, again, that will create a challenge. Secondly, again, you look at the revenue by tax. Even if Honorable is so confident that we may exceed that, I think there are some gray area that have not been addressed, especially the capital gain tax. We might not see that take effect in January. We might see it take effect during the year, but at what percentage will it be? And if at all, the stakeholders are being engaged. So definitely, again, that could also have an impact in terms of revenue. So the major challenge that you can see in this budget is already there for all of us to see. And like you likely said, the revenue of 2025 is even higher than the revenue of 2026. And then the expenditure of 2026 is higher than the expenditure of 2025. So it's already a big, big challenge. I think one major challenge that I see in this budget is revenue.
Absolutely. Well, the government expects 34.33 trillion revenue target for 2026, despite achieving 61% of its revenue in the third quarter of 2025. Well, it's a fine place to leave it. We must say many thanks for joining us on the program this morning. Chairman House Committee on Economic, Boyega Isiaka, and also the CEO Finance with Mukhtar, Mr. Mukhtar Mohammed. Many thanks for joining us on TVC Breakfast Saturday.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on this. Well,
thank you very much.
We saw the analysis from the honorable in the House, Boyega Isiaka, representing a particular constituency in Ogun State. Well, my question is that we expect to see that this budget will definitely transform the lives of Nigerians. A lot of people some Nigerians are not even bothered about the figures. What they want to see, let's have food on our table, let's have security, safety of lives and property is key.
Absolutely.
But you see, the people are quite simplistic. Nigerians are not very difficult people to manage. You know, they just want to have the bare basics of life. Now, if this budget is going to do it, good. If the budget is not going to do it, how tight are we going to tighten our belts? That's what everybody is asking. But my concern about the 2026 budget is the load that is going to be transferred for 2025 to 2026. So government has to be deliberate, it has to be intentional in ensuring that this budget is implemented to the latter. And for that to succeed, they have to win the trust of the people, because a lot of us wonder what business do the people have to do with the implementation of the budgets. Look, man, it has a lot. Absolutely. It has a lot.
It absolutely
so we should look towards government, trust the government a little bit more, and support government programs.
Well, the president made mention of enough is enough on multiple budgets in Nigeria that come the 1st of April, we'll start implementing one single budget.
Absolutely. It is very, very important. But I think the focus should actually be on how this is going to be implemented, because we've seen this happen year after year after year. But I love the fact that he's actually focused and looking in that direction, meaning a close eye is actually there to make sure that this doesn't happen. And he also puts a timeline to it. So we're actually hoping that it actually happens. But my take on this entire budget situation is the fact that, I mean, expenditure is large. It's getting larger and larger. Nigerians we are literally, the word is worried in some situations, talking about how, I mean, they just seem to be spending more and more. But I mean, put in geared towards security is definitely a fine place to go. So let's actually see. Let's
be hopeful. 2026 budget is a budget of consolidation, renewed resilience, and shared prosperity.
Yes.